Okay, Yvette, let's talk about goal setting. Let's talk about, how, narrowing our goals is actually can help us achieve more than we thought. And that's like a contradictory kind of statement in a way. Like the more narrow you go, the wider you go, which I think is a big topic that we've been talking about with our leadership teams that we're supporting across North America. And really this comes from stage one of the work that we do with them, right? Is stage one is designing goals and measuring those goals, and we have that process where we help them get clear on what goals should be should be the goals that they're focusing on, and what areas should they focus on. But everybody who goes through this process gets to a point where think they're setting the right goals, but the goals they're actually setting, they aren't good enough. We have to help them get a little bit more clear, a little bit more narrow. And so what happens is they think they're setting a goal. They're like, hey, we're going to set a goal. We're going to improve fluency. We're going to improve like productive struggle. We want more productive struggle in our classrooms. It's like, it feels like that's a good area, but what's happening, right, is like people and leaders are going, these are broad goals. Like these are way too broad of goals to actually make impact this year or next year. Like that's what we're seeing when we're starting this kind of design and measure process, is that everybody kind of gets hung up with this. But let's dig into the goals and why broad goals actually are, because it sounds like we don't want, like, here's the problem that I think why people make broad goals is they're like, I don't want to exclude anything. I don't want to, like, I want to work on everything. But we know when we work on everything, we work on nothing. So like there's one point right there of like why broad goals don't work. But in your opinion, Yvette, like, tell us why, like these ambitious goals that we all have, like, why are they not good?
Fluency, I think, is a great example of course, I think that there isn't a single district that would argue that a goal is for students to be more fluent and true fluency, not memorization of fact, but automaticity of facts where they are flexible and, efficient, all those great things. If we actually start to unpack fluency, we're talking about fluency with whole numbers. We're talking about fluency with fractions and decimals and percent as operator. We're looking at all four operators. We're looking at positive and negative numbers. Like fluency, although of course it's the outcome that we want, just students to be more comfortable working with all four operators. How do you actually turn that into an immediate next step that you're going to work on next week and the week after and a month from now? And sometimes I think when we try to tackle something that's so ambitious, we don't know where to start, so we just don't start. And we end up focusing a lot on pedagogy rather than actually focusing on deepening our content knowledge.
Got it. Yeah. It's like when and this is the thing. It's like, because you don't want to exclude anything, and so you keep your goal too broad. And then when you go to start the work, you're like, well, how do I fix and support teachers on implementing fluency in the classroom? I have this grade, I have this grade, I have this grade, I have these topics, I have these topics, I've got multiplication, I got division. Like there's a lot specifically that we need to support. And then it becomes overwhelming and going like, how do I actually take a step in the direction of supporting that? And because we're not specific enough of what outcome we're trying to achieve, and we don't know exactly what topic or what grade band we want improvement on, or what the actual measurable is going to be, like what is it that we're trying to change, then we get caught up in like all the day to day. And this is where like the firefighting comes in, because it's like all of a sudden that you're supposed to be working on these big goals, but because you don't know where to start on strengthening it, because you're trying to strengthen everybody's all at the same time, you let all the firefighting take over. You're like, okay, I'm going to focus on this little checklist today. I'm going to focus on this little thing today. I'm going to just knock it off my list. I'm going to knock this off my list. And you do all the things you feel like you're being productive. So you do all of that. And then at the end of the day, you feel like you're productive. Like you've got, like, I did this today, but it's actually, you did something, but you also didn't work on the most important thing that you thought was most important, which maybe in this case, the example we're talking about here is like strengthening fluency across the district. Like that's a fine, say, zone to work on, but it's not specific enough for you to actually make impact on this year. Like you have to get more specific. And what I just heard you say is if you're going to choose fluency as a main focus zone for the work you're going to do for this year, next 5 years, maybe the next 10 years, because you could probably safely say you're not going to want to go away from that particular goal for a long time. And I wouldn't recommend you switch your big focus focus zones too often. But if you are going to focus on fluency, I heard you say is get real specific, not only on like what grade band we should be looking at, but what maybe topic we should be looking at. Like, is it this year we're going to focus on subtraction? And that's it? Is that good enough? Like, is that as specific as we should be getting?
Well, and I love that example. So let's say, as an example, yes, of course, overall, we want to improve fluency for all students, but we decide that for the next few months, we're going to make a commitment to invest time and resources into grades 2 and 3 and the operation of subtraction. And we're going to really explore the structures of subtraction. Oftentimes students think about subtraction and, you say, what is subtraction? They say it's takeaway. Mm-hmm. Or we often see the standard algorithm for subtraction being introduced really early on without a lot of conceptual understanding. So what if instead we made a commitment to ourselves and to our district that we're going to strengthen our understanding of subtraction in grades 2 and 3? We're going to see subtraction as both comparison and removal subtraction. We're going to look at strategies like counting on, using partials. We're going to look at constant difference. We're going to really understand when we use the operator of subtraction. And what I really like about a goal this specific is that it's achievable. I can actually do that work and confidently say at the end of 2 months, 3 months, 6 months that I've made a difference in that area. And what I love about a content-specific goal like subtraction is that oftentimes when we lift the hood on a concept like subtraction that people thought they understood, but you actually reveal through this collaborative learning opportunity that maybe we didn't know as much as we thought we did about subtraction, what that's going to do is it's going to generate a natural curiosity about the other operators. So you're basically not only strengthening subtraction, you're revealing the need to build conceptual understanding for educators, because you're exposing the fact that maybe what we thought we knew about subtraction was not broad enough or it wasn't deep enough. And one thing that I like about, let's say, subtraction, or it could be fractions, working with fractions, it could be division, is these are concepts that teachers often find difficult to teach. It's like students tend to struggle with subtraction in primary grades, particularly scenarios that are looking at difference more than less than. So we're simultaneously strengthening our fluency, but through a concept that might be challenging for teachers, challenging for students.
And what happens, right? Like what you're saying is like these things aren't in isolation, like this because I think we get worried about like, if I'm only like, am I only going to work? Like, what about all the other teachers that are not teaching subtraction this year? Or it's like, what if I teach subtraction? It's like, is it just subtraction? And what about teachers who are past subtraction? Like you get worried about helping everyone. And I think there's a few things about that worry that we should dispel. I think, and we've seen this from other districts who have done this work, is that when you get specific, you're saying when you get specific, because they're not in isolation, you're going to inspire that group of teachers. So let's say you picked a particular grade to strengthen that strand up with those teachers. Those teachers are in like that automatically in the flywheel. Like they're in this flywheel where they're working on their skills and their content skills. You're saying that's going to spill over into other content areas or other strands because they have this natural curiosity. Like, if I didn't know this, then what about multiplication? What about division? And they have the epiphanies that they could start to spill over. Those also change pedagogical moves, because if you can create the math epiphany around a content strand, it usually will always create an epiphany around what pedagogical moves. So you're not only focusing on, say, the fluency strand, you're focusing on the pedagogical moves that come with it, which could be all topics. Like the moves that you use for that particular topic are just as good to use when you get to, say, algebra and patterning. So like there's that flywheel that each of those teachers is involved in. It's because it gets easier for them to have the epiphanies, easier for them to build their skills. And then next time, whatever strand you pick after you hit that goal and you have a new goal, it's easier for those teachers to build their capacity because they've already got this like flywheel happening. But then there's also, like, in a way, this bigger flywheel, and because if you can, because I think one of the drawbacks that I think a lot of us have when we're designing professional development is I can't in good conscience just focus on the grade 3 teachers. What about the grade 6 teachers? What about the grade 8 teachers? Are we really going to leave the support out for there? Like, how do if I have coaching involved, like, can I just coach everybody? And if you're going to take that approach, what's happening is you're going too wide with your resources in a way, and you're not, say, building capacity for long-term sustainability. Because if you, let's say, help those teachers in those grade bands, and the flywheel approach is happening for those teachers, think about 1 year from now, how strong they are going to be with that particular strand and their pedagogical moves. Like they're not only going to have like that strength, but they're also having strength on like lesson design and leadership and working with teachers and coaching skills. All of this is being developed because you went narrow, and you're now building capacity within the district for teacher leaders, for teachers to kind of like help other teachers in their own schools. Like this is like kind of like, in a way, you're doing that train the trainer model without training the trainer. Like you're just building capacity with groups of teachers, which spills over to strengthen other groups of teachers. Like I think that's, we just had this conversation outside of this podcast, by kind of saying, like, by helping a group of teachers build their capacity, you're building capacity within the district. Whereas if you, say, try to go wide and go like, I want to design professional development for everyone, and I'm going to try to only make sure I include everybody in these particular grades in all schools, you're spreading yourself, or you're spreading your resources very, very, very thin. And when you do that, you can pat yourself on the back and say, I helped everybody move. But it's almost like you're helping 300 people or 300 educators like get 1% or 0.5% better. But if you go narrow, with the group of teachers to help them with their capacity around that content knowledge that feels narrow, you're helping like 30 teachers, 50 teachers get like 20% better. And like generally, as a whole, that's better for long-term sustainability, because now, like, let's say 2 years from now, 3 years ago, if you keep focusing on that model, that strategy, those structures, you've got way more capacity as teachers, for leaders, for understanding what's important in mathematics, which is great for like turnover to creating leaders in your buildings. Like this is the long-term sustainability. The flywheel approach to going narrow actually helps you stay wider.
And one thing that as leaders, I think we need to be, I guess, continuously seeking information, because we are the ones maybe determining, along with the rest of our leadership team, where to start and with what grade and what concept. And even that can be challenging if we're not really clear on math development, what content matters at what grade band, what are the key standards at that grade level. And so if we are the people who are in the decision-making seat, I think there's ways for us to position ourselves to be, better equipped to determine what that starting point is. And that's, of course, like engaging with the broader mathematics community, looking to research, asking people who are doing this work, creating communities with other districts, with other leaders, so that we feel confident that we are making the right first step. And I would
think that's
argue,
a worry, right? Like it's a worry.
Sure.
It's like, okay, if I'm in, like, oh my gosh, like a year, 2 years ago, I was a classroom teacher. Now I'm responsible for designing professional development for an entire district, or maybe it's a middle school across the district, or maybe it's elementary across the district. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's a lot of weight. And now I have to get real specific. What happens if I pick the wrong goal?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's where I would certainly say, we have a professional responsibility to constantly be improving our own content knowledge, engaging in mathematics, we always argue, John, like doing the math ourselves as well, so that we are positioned to give that guidance. But at the end of the day, I truthfully wonder if it's like starting on something and it being the wrong thing is better than not starting at all. Because sometimes I do think that our goals are just so broad and so ambitious that we focus on the pedagogy, we focus on the surface level work, and we don't actually truly get to strengthening our mathematics content knowledge. And we know that will have the biggest impact on teacher capacity.
Yeah, it's there. The research is there to accompany it, and I think we get scared. Like, what does that look like? Like, I've probably have a history of only helping in pedagogical moves and not content knowledge moves, and I probably only been engaged in professional development that had pedagogical moves and not content knowledge moves. So, what does it actually look like when I want to help a teacher strengthen that up, and how do I do that, right? Like, how do I design the support for a teacher to build, say, that content knowledge with making sure it feels like it's the right support for them as well. And I think that's where sometimes we get hung up. We're like, it's hard and it's going to take a lot of work and a lot of work. And I think this is why going narrow is better than wide, because when you stay wide, that what I just said becomes the scary part. But when you're like, if I could just say by the end of the year, I'm going to help my grades 3 teachers strengthen their own skills and build their confidence. And then here's the scale I'm going to use on the look for scale of like what confidence looks like on subtraction, then that feels more attainable. And therefore I'm working towards that. And then when I hit it, I'm just going to make a new goal.
Yeah.
And we're going to strengthen another area, or we're going to strengthen a grade band. Like, I know one of our groups, we support this. They're in year 3 of the program and year 3 of the work that they've been doing. And this is the exact pathway they took. They focused on some grades to start, and specifically around certain models and strategies to use in, say, grade 1 and grade 5. And because they had 2 coaches and they were going to work in those 2 areas. And then every year they moved the target, moved to, say, the focus area, the focus grade band, to strengthen these different areas. And they make huge progress in each of these grade bands because they went real specific.
So that's a perfect example of, let's maybe just share one of these narrow goals and get really precise in our own language. So let's say we're noticing that many of our students are relying on the standard algorithm for subtraction, but they really don't understand what they're doing. And they're making mistakes because they're, missing steps, making errors, and they really are not able to judge the reasonableness of their answer. They can't tell you whether or not that's a reasonable answer to the subtraction scenario that they are tackling. So then maybe our goal is to find a solution to that problem. So then we start to look at, okay, well, what do we know about subtraction? What do we understand about the structures? What are strategies beyond the standard algorithm? How would we introduce them? That's work on its own, just that one idea, but it's work worthwhile doing, and it's also achievable. Like, I could feel really good at the end of the year if I made a shift where students weren't solely relying on the standard algorithm for subtraction, and they could use reasonableness to judge their solutions and to articulate whether or not that made sense. That would be a massive win. And as you already mentioned, John, subtraction doesn't live in isolation. There are so many other aspects of math that rely in particular on comparison, subtraction, and reasonableness. So it will have a long-term impact. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of our, maybe food for thought or consideration for you if you are a district leader or in a coach role or consultant role, and you're just feeling like you're kind of spinning your tires, and you know what you want the goal to be at the end. You're working toward this big long-term outcome of having students be more flexible and fluent with all 4 operators, but you're not making a lot of traction. Our suggestion is maybe let's get more specific, more narrow, be precise about, I'm going to work with this grade, with this set of strategies, with this operator, because the great thing is you can do that and actually realistically see the results you're hoping for this year. And then you can continue to add goals. And then, year after year, you're building that capacity long term. but at least, the change you're hoping to see will be visible this year.
Love it. Love it. Yvette just said, go narrow to go wider. Also, when we work with our leaders on this, one of the questions that we ask them right off the bat when they're starting to design how to get more narrow and which to narrow in on is and Yvette kind of like hinted towards this, which is, what specific thing when you get to the end of the year, being like, if we just did that one thing, just that small one thing, that we would be like, that would be huge for the work that we are doing, in this say area or zone that we're strengthening across the district for long-term results. What is the one thing? Like, because that can help pinpoint the one thing. Like, I think Yvette would say subtraction is your thing, but you also, what is the one thing? If you can answer the one thing and then narrow it down even a little bit further, then you've got a key result to hit for this year.
Yeah. And I mean, that's just it. And we did talk a little bit too, and this will be our, last consideration maybe, is you can also make that one thing really relevant for your teachers. But if you have a scope and sequence and they're following a scope and sequence, and you look ahead and say, I know that fractions are coming up at the beginning of next term. I know that fractions are a concept that we typically, struggle with, and it's an area of achievement that we want to reinforce. So then focus on that. Focus on, if it's like fluency and you want to be operating with fractions, then like whatever it is. I don't know that there's necessarily a wrong choice. I'd rather just pick something and really invest the time in deeply understanding it, rather than trying to do like a superficial priority on everything at once that doesn't really amount to much in the end.
All right, let's leave it with that. Go forth, figure out what is your goal, get narrow, and then get more narrow, and then get more narrow after that. Take care, everyone. And we look forward to hearing your thoughts on what goals are you going to hit and what goals are you going to make this year.